Welcome to my 3D printed Airbus A320 cockpit. Now I spent a little bit of time trying to create this thing and it has not been without difficulty and stress. This thing is actually fairly simple. We'll get to that later. But first of all, how on earth and why do I want to have something like this? So the aim essentially is, can I create something in which I can get away from using a keyboard? Because let's be real, when you're on a real plane, the airline pilot doesn't just whip out the keyboard to turn something on and off. That would be weird. And as flight simmers, we're always striving to get the most immersion from our setup. So over the last 2 weeks, I've actually been trying to create something from a 3D printer that I can actually use in the cockpit, and hopefully you guys can follow along. Now, this was not a process without a fair bit of pain. I am not a DIY person. Without further ado, let's get to the beginning. Which takes me nicely onto today's sponsor of this video, Bambu Labs. I reached out to them saying, hey guys, I want to print an Airbus A320 cockpit using one of your machines. And they said, yes, surprisingly. So they sent me a top of the range Bambu Labs X1 Carbon. Now this thing is as easy to print things on as printing paper. Literally, you go online, you find a file, you hit print, and you go. I then spent a bit of time researching to see what kind of thing I can do. And I managed to find a full-size 3D printable Airbus cockpit, which I then shrunk down to 65% and started to print. We have spent such a long time printing different things, and now it's time to put together the mini Airbus cockpit. Now, before we start, we need to lay out the things that you need. Obviously, you need your 3D printed part, 2 Stream Decks, and 2 LCD displays. I've just got some store-bought generic rubbish Android tablet, which I definitely won't regret later. He does regret it later. But if you've got some stuff lying around that fits, then happy days, that will probably work for you. I have no idea what I'm doing. Genuinely, I have never done anything like this before. Hopefully we get something that looks kind of like what I expect it to look. Now, without further ado, let's get to the music and let's run a time lapse. First step should be easy. All you're doing is lining up the printed panels and it starts to look absolutely amazing because it looks like a little Airbus cockpit. But because I have butterfingers, I end up doing something like this, yes. And yes, you're going to be thinking, you're a doctor, you should have good hand-eye coordination. Well, I'm not a surgeon. Anyway, the design I have has got slots so that you can actually link these together, which is where I put the glue, and it actually seems to work quite well. Okay, so that's the first bit done. Actually looks pretty good. Just hope it actually stays together. Anyway, next let's go on to the ECAMs and the engine bits as well. Again, same as before, link these together and using more glue. Just make sure you have a bit of a better ventilation system than I did, because after gluing all this stuff together, I'm not going to lie to you, I started feeling a little bit dizzy. Although it may not have been the glue, it may have been the sense of accomplishment. Okay, well, I've done a bit of this now and it's, the sigh of a guy who doesn't enjoy DIY. Days. Gluing stuff together is a bit awkward, but yeah, so far, so good. In the meantime though, I have printed quite a lot of things with this 3D printer. The X1 Carbon is absolutely amazing in its ability to just create stuff. As you can see here, we have got the AMS, which has got the different colors that you can use to print different things. And it all comes out on this, it all comes out on this plate here and looks absolutely wonderful. Down there, got a box of different colors as well. And this awesome LCD screen lets you get an idea of what you're printing. As you can see here, there's lots of different things you can see. And it is genuinely as easy as printing like with a normal traditional paper printer. You find something you like, you download it, you press print, and all of a sudden you have a 3D item in your hand. Now, I'm genuinely excited about this machine, but you don't need something like the X1 Carbon to be able to print Airbus flight sim panels. You can use their A1 Mini, a much cheaper entry-level alternative for people to get started in 3D printing. Anyway, back to the build. So far, so good. So to actually hold the screens in place, I had an idea that I would use some foam board, thick foam board that would just kind of keep the screens recessed over the places they should be. Now, in theory, this was a good idea, but in practice, it was actually quite hard to cut it to size, especially on such a small scale. It just didn't work, and I had to work out another way to mount the screens. Now, this wasn't the only problem I faced. Initially, I had the idea to use a cheap Android display, such as this. This is a cheap Android display. It's called the Laser, and I tried to use it, and it was rubbish. But I had an iPad lying around and decided to borrow an iPad, and that worked pretty well. To give the Airbus cockpit a little bit more structure, I used a bit of thick cardboard, as you can see, that black stuff there. Using 2 Elgato Stream Deck Minis, they were just the perfect size to create buttons and to also look like landing gear and auto brake panels that you'd see in the Airbus itself. I'm using the Flight Panels software as always, which does a perfect job of replicating what I want it to do. Last but not least, I'm using a Next Level Racing Boeing edition, and I couldn't possibly be flying an Airbus with that on, so I 3D printed an Airbus sign and stuck tack it on before we get to the finished design. If you're enjoying this video so far, please like and subscribe because it really helps me with the ability to make new videos. I've started a Discord, there's a link down below, and there's also a new Patreon if you want to support the work I'm doing on YouTube here. Back to the flight deck. Honestly, I couldn't be happier with how this has turned up. It's kind of exceeded my expectations. Now, who knew you could 3D print a panel from this? And you know what? There are a lot of people around on the internet who are much more talented than me, who have made some amazing builds. But for me, I'm pretty happy, as you can see here. Now, I actually figured out how to mount the screens in a eureka moment. Essentially, I'm using aluminium profile, and the screens are just sitting in the channels of the bits of metal that are behind. And this creates the structure that holds all of the pieces together. You can see the Stream Decks there are just mounted with double-sided tape. It looks a bit silly, but it's a prototype, so it's okay. Then the whole thing is attached to a pretty chunky clamp, which means you can clamp it onto pretty much anything, any rig you've got. As you can see here, I actually do have two full motion simulators, one primarily flight sim, one's primarily racing sim, but I've managed to put the actual Airbus flight deck on both. So we're in a cold and dark state here. As you can see, screens are off and not showing anything, and we're going to go up to the overhead panel here and we're going to hit external power. So we're going to actually just come out here so you can see what's happening when I hit it, external power, and you hear the clunk as the electrics come to life. And doesn't that look amazing? You can see self-testing is in progress, as you'd see on the actual Airbus screen as well. All right, now everything's running, as you can see here. Primary flight display all showing. That looks very good. And our flight controls there. Let's get this back onto engine. And yeah, there we go. And yeah, as I said, guys, it's not perfect, but honestly, I could not be happier. You get the gist. It works really, really well. Now, I've done all this stuff, but the question is, does it actually allow me to do what I set out to do? To be able to fly without touching the keyboard or mouse. Now, I think we're almost 80% there. There is one thing coming next week that is gonna allow us to definitely try it. Today though, we're gonna do a takeoff, and I'm just gonna show you guys what this looks like doing that. So this is genuinely the first time I've done a takeoff in here, so this is for you guys. Okay, then we are at Madeira and we are doing a standard Airbus takeoff, setting 50% and stabilizing engines. The motion system comes to life and we set our flex takeoff power. Now, this feels amazing. Even in miniature, having displays and screens down there added so much to my immersion. This is awesome. Yeah, it was absolutely awesome. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, please, as I said before, like, subscribe, do comment, and let me know in the comments if this is something that you'd be interested in. I'd love to be able to create something for you guys. Now I've started a Patreon. If you want to support me in that way, the link is in the description. But yes, I am looking forward to going on some very Airbus-y adventures in this, and I can't wait to take you guys with me. We're going to be flying on the VATSIM network very shortly, doing some crazy, exciting flights. Anyway, till next time, guys. Catch you later.